Hello YouTubers, Brustigundo here. The current time is 7:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Today's date, July 26, 2024. And today I'm going to be doing a spoiler-free review of Sword and Fairy Together Forever. We're going to be talking about the good, the bad, what I would have fixed, and my final score out of 5 and 10. So let's get started, shall we? First thing I actually enjoyed about this game was the soundtrack. If you can get past all the chaos of the battles and fights throughout the game, you actually can hear the soundtrack and it's pretty good. You do find more songs throughout the game, and as soon as you discover them, they will start playing in the background if you enable them through the menu. They add a bit in a sense of depth to the game itself, and it makes the world feel lively, given that the soundtrack changes based on where your location is. It also changes based on what battles you're in as well, including boss fights. Moving on to the next thing I enjoyed about this game, I'd have to say the art style that they chose. Each character is individual in its own right, as well as the world around them. The scenery is nice. Each background is distinct from one another, but they all blend together to create a nice game world that feels lively. Next up would have to be the character dynamics. I did quite enjoy the character dynamics between each of the 4 characters that you play as in this game, as well as their family members and friends throughout the game. You get to learn more about them overall, and their connections to the world and people around them. Especially our 4 main characters, of course. There are some funny moments as well between different characters and how their dynamics flow throughout, creating a nice flow. Last but not least is the story. Throughout the entire game, I was engrossed in the story. I kept up with it throughout, even though the translation was a little bit spotty here and there, but that's to be expected. I was able to follow along quite well and really get into the nitty-gritty of the story as a whole, being able to find out what's going on and being able to pick it up and put it down as need be, without losing a beat of the story, of course. So without spoiling anything, I think you guys will enjoy it if you decide to play it. Although I will say this, you will have to pay attention, because if you miss anything, it's going to create confusion later. And now we move on to the bad things about this game. And man, do I have quite a few to tell you guys. Now, without spoiling things, I'll try to keep it as spoiler-free as I can. No promises, though. Now, this first thing is going to be a bit of a hit or miss depending on how fast you can read English subtitles, because this game did not get an English dub. I wish it would have, but it didn't. So you'll have to be very fluid in reading subtitles. Although they didn't get the chance to proofread this, or chose not to either way, I wish they would have done so. But be prepared to read a lot of the subtitles. There is no English dub. I repeat, there is no English dub for this game. So you will have to read subtitles and be sure not to miss any of them, because if you do, it will create confusion later. Next thing up, the hit detection. Sometimes the hit detection is very, very shoddy, depending on where you're hitting the enemy and where the enemy is hitting you. In some cases, you may be just outside of a hit range of an enemy and not manage to take any damage, and in other cases, you'll be just outside of the range and take a good amount of damage. Either way, it can work for you or against you depending on how you play it. Sometimes the game just likes to be random and hurt you for no apparent reason. Coming up right behind that is item placement, especially when it comes time to collect items throughout the game. Some items are in various places throughout the game that you really can't get to. In some cases in the game, I saw items that I really couldn't get a hold of, so they were forever stuck wherever they decided to end up at, which can be frustrating when you need to grab something and can't get to it. I also didn't like the fact that you only get to use a limited amount of your items in any given fight. Say for example, if I have a total of 20 healing items, I can only use about 4 to 5 of them at a time per battle. Now, I wish they would have given you access to all of your healing items, or should I say all of your items in general, in every fight, that would have made a lot of them a heck of a lot easier. But no, they decided to limit you on how many you can use in each fight. And that is what caused me a lot of difficulty in this game. Another thing I didn't like was the fact that your enemies can give you status effects, but it seems like when you try to give your enemies status effects, they barely ever work, and when they do, it's usually for very short periods. An example of this was when I was close to the end of the game. I had some very difficult times with one of the bosses. I won't say who for spoiling purposes, but they could do status effects all day long, but if I tried to even do one status effect, couldn't do it, not once. And that pissed me off a lot. And last but not least, a mild spoiler would be the final boss. I did not like the final boss fight of this game. The final boss was heavily unfair, and certain things that needed health bars didn't have them, so you couldn't tell how far you were in hitting these items to finish the boss fight, which made things a lot more difficult. Because in the final boss fight, you have to run around hitting things. Since those things don't have health bars, you can't tell how far along they are until they're shattered. Now, without spoiling too much, I really wished they would have set the difficulty of this final boss a little bit lower. Now, given the fact that I played on common mode, which I think is normal mode by normal difficulty, however, play this on easy mode if you don't feel like having a headache. That's all I can recommend. So now we're in the last part of the video, or pretty close to it I should say, what I would have fixed. So, the first thing I would have fixed, the translation. Now this is a small thing to most people, however, to me, I had to reread a lot and try to piece everything together, because going from, I guess, Chinese to English, nobody proofread this. So it was difficult to have to keep rereading things in order to put them together. Now, I'm no slow reader, for those of you who know me. However, for the sake of my viewers, I had to let the subtitles sit at least a good minute so that you guys could read them. The next thing I would have fixed in this game was having an English dub. Now, some of you may be ready to pitch your pitchforks and torches at the idea that a game that is foreign should have an English dub, but I feel like for those people who don't like reading, you should be able to listen to the dialogue and what's going on to be able to figure out what's happening in the story, not have to rely on subtitles alone. Now, if the company didn't want to pay for legitimate voice actors, they could have just asked their friends and family members to help them out, or even fans of the previous series. Maybe even volunteer work would have been good. Either way, an English dub would have been appreciated. And now we're on to the final part of the video, my final score out of 5 and 10. So out of 5, I give this game a 4 out of 5, and out of 10, I give this game a 9 out of 10. So, if you stuck around this long, I thank you for sticking around and listening to what I have to say. Hopefully I didn't bore you to tears. And, as I say this time and every time, Buster Gundo, signing out for now. Be safe, be smart, be silent. For whatever's in darkness, everybody take up the light. Be safe out there.